Her mother asked her to tell her father that lunch would be early today, because this afternoon their Amma is taking them to the Winter Palace Park. On her way to her father's laboratory, she has to pass through the courtyard where her grandfather and grandmother live. She greets them with formality and respect, because even today, old people in China still command great veneration in accordance with ancient Chinese tradition. Dr. Wu and his assistant are hard at work making microscope slides for college classes. Teaching jobs are scarce since the war, and so this is the way Dr. Wu earns his living. The microscope was borrowed from a university. Dr. Wu gives his student assistant a place to live as part of his wages. Chinese students make great sacrifices to get an education. Meanwhile, lunch is being prepared. Turnips are more plentiful and cheaper than most vegetables in Beiping, and consequently are part of almost every meal. After being chopped, they're cooked over an old-fashioned coal range. There are no modern conveniences in Chinese kitchens, often not even running water. All drinking water is boiled to prevent disease and is usually drunk hot. This servant or Amma may seem like a luxury, but most middle-class families have one. She's considered part of the family, and they feel as responsible for her as for a close relative. At last, luncheon is served, a frugal luncheon, and yet the big meal of the day. In quantity, it may seem substantial, but in caloric value, it is dangerously low. There's 1 egg for 10 people, and it's given to the old folks, but they prefer it to give it to their grandson, to a young life just beginning, to the boy who will carry on the family name after they have passed on. In keeping with Chinese custom, Mrs. Wu serves her husband's parents. Chinese family life has a kind of quiet dignity and graciousness which is sometimes missing in our busy Western world. Before the war, bread in middle-class families was made of wheat, but now almost everybody eats wo-wo-to, the cornbread of poor Chinese peasants. Even in good times, meat was used mostly for flavoring. Now, there's no meat at all. After lunch, the children go with their Amma to the Winter Palace. In pavilions and terraces along this artificial lake, Chinese poets once composed their songs, while courtiers and royal ladies laughed and played. Mrs. Wu had the girls' Amma take them on this trip to stimulate their interest in the historic past of their great nation. But the girls are interested in the present, too, in the life that is going on around them, in short, in anything that's alive, even if it's only ornamental goldfish and carp. Curiously enough, some of these fish have been alive a good while. Some of them are almost a century old. Though they began life as the pets of emperors and princes, they have passed into the hands of the common people, reflecting in their way the story of China itself, ancient and modern. Meanwhile, back in the Wu household, another chapter in the story of China is being written. A relatively small chapter, perhaps, concerning the future of only one Chinese girl. Dr. Wu is wondering how he'll raise the money to send Yu Mei to school. He considers selling his Phi Beta Kappa key and the fraternity key he received at an American university. They would hardly bring enough. Mrs. Wu has a better idea: her jewels. Most middle-class families in China had to part with their most cherished possessions in order to live during the war, and the Wus have only a few left. It's a big question. They may need these jewels later on to sell for food. But for the Chinese, no sacrifice is too great for education. They prize it traditionally, but also because they realize its importance for their nation's future. They prize it in a way that we can never understand. We take it for granted. For them, it is something to be fought for. Bedtime comes very early for the girls, as part of Dr. Wu's plan for conserving their energy. Americans might find these beds a little uncomfortable. There's no mattress, just boards covered by a quilt. But Chinese children learn to like their hard beds. In fact, some Chinese students who visit America complain about the softness of our beds and prefer to sleep on the floor. The mosquito netting is necessary in Beiping because the malaria mosquito still exists there. And now it's time for sleep. The next morning, firecrackers are set off to celebrate a holiday. It's Grandfather Wu's birthday, and a formal ceremony will be held. Seats of honor are set on each side of a table, where the historic figure of the god of long life adds his charm to the decoration. Long noodles, wound into a pyramid, symbolize long life, too. These noodles were made early in the morning by the Amma, and this is the way she did it. Long noodles are as important to a birthday party in China as a birthday cake is to us, and just as much care is taken in their preparation. Later on, these noodles will be cooked and eaten. And there's another dish of uncooked food on the altar: peach bread. Bread that's been molded and colored to look like peaches. Peaches, too, are symbolic of a long and happy life. Meanwhile, everybody is getting ready for the ceremony of greeting grandfather and grandmother. The Amma helps the younger girls fix their hair. Neat and well-groomed hair is important to Chinese women, and on festive occasions they always decorate it with flowers. Dee is busy admiring a new pair of leather shoes, a change from the homemade cloth shoes he usually wears. At last the ceremony begins. Grandfather and grandmother take the chairs of honor and get ready to receive the greetings of the family. Western customs may have come to China, but on occasions like this, the ancient and time-honored traditions still assert themselves. First, the older generation, Dr. and Mrs. Wu, come in to pay their respects. In the old days, they would have made the old-fashioned kowtow and bumped their heads on the floor. But today it is enough to bow respectfully. Grandmother was born at a time when women's feet were still bound. This custom has almost entirely died out today. And now the next generation, the children, pay their respects. Dee is on his own for the first time. Last year he did it this way. Even babies pay their respects on a grandfather's birthday. That afternoon, Grandfather, who was obviously in a holiday mood himself, decides to give the girls a treat. A retreat in Beiping usually means an outing. The trip today will be to the Temple of Heaven, the most beautiful example of religious architecture in the whole of China, and another monument to man's belief in a power beyond himself, no matter what his creed. The roof of the temple is made of tiles, which are brilliant blue in color, and the dome is capped with gold. Even to the Christian Chinese living in hardship and poverty today, the temple may bring inspiration out of China's glorious past for courage in facing a far from certain future. But courage is not enough, and the educated Chinese, like Dr. and Mrs. Wu, know this. More and more of their countrymen must have the opportunity for education. Only then will the old walls of fear and ignorance disappear, so that China may take her rightful place in the world today.
老世界，国家的记忆。